So we should.
Okay. Well, good afternoon. Welcome to Lehigh County Authority Board of Director meeting. Today is Monday, January 13th, 2025. New year, the first meeting for the new year. The meeting has been held in a hybrid fashion, either live, in person, or people are on Zoom or calling. So could you please roll call for the board of?
You bet. Roll call of the board, Brian Noggle. Amir Famili.
Here.
Ted Lyons.
Here.
Jeff Morgan.
Here.
Norma Cusick.
Here.
Kevin Baker. Linda Rosenfeld. Here. Sean Ziller. Mark Grammis.
Here.
We do have a quorum. Six board members, yeah.
Great. So the package was sent in advance via mail or was posted on the website. Reviewing the agenda, Lisa, do we need any changes on the agenda or do we need an executive session?
There are no changes to the agenda. I just want to highlight that we've reformatted the agenda slightly to create the grouping of special topics today around the lead service line project. So the agenda looks a little different. We also do have an executive session plan for after the close of this meeting to discuss potential litigation.
Thank you, Lisa. Let's move on to the approval of the last year meeting. Jeff?
I make a motion that we approve the minutes presented in the packet.
Second.
Motion by Jeff, second by Linda. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Any questions? No? Okay. Any public comment on the action on the item which is not on the agenda?
No, thank you, Amir.
Yep, no, thank you.
Mayor,
Yes.
I have one. I thought this would be the place to put it.
Okay.
Just to, at the start of the meeting, to introduce two new faces in the room. First of all, in the second row is Sharab Kaushik,
Oh.
and he's a new member of the law firm at King Spry, our solicitor. He's not new there, but he's new to us. And so be taking on some of our projects. And yep. And then in the back row, we have Rennie Keen-Dengel, who is our new lead program and compliance manager, started before the holidays. And since we have a lot of lead projects on the agenda today, we thought he could listen to those. And if you have any questions or if you want to say anything to introduce yourself.
Yeah, Rennie Keen-Dengel just started December 3rd, and yeah, getting up to speed on all things lead and copper and connecting with folks and yeah, starting to manage things. So a lot to do, but excited, and we'll get it done.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
So moving to our agenda, correct? So the first item on the agenda, on the special agenda items, is rescinding approval for resolution 11-2024-2 revised borrowing resolution of Penvest financing. There are yellow pages and a digital package, pages 8 to 14.
Thank you. As I noted previously, we have this new grouping of projects through this heading of special agenda items. All three of the items that are shown here kind of go together. We're just trying to walk through the action items in a programmed way so we can get through the material and read it make sense. So the yellow memo talks about specifically about Penvest and the borrowing issue with Penvest for lead service line replacement project cycle 1. And just by way of background, we have been working with Penvest for many years, trying to determine how to affect borrowing low interest loans or grants with Penvest for the Allentown vision. And we have had some success with that in the past. However, when we came to this project for the lead service line replacement project, we encountered an obstacle that we seem to not be able to overcome. We've spoken about this with the board previously. So without getting into all the sordid historical details, we'll just say that we applied for funding in 2023. We thought we had a process that would work to allow us to receive the grant and the loan. We asked the board to approve a modified borrowing resolution in November because we had closing plan for November 14th. And then essentially right before the closing, we heard from Penvest that this obstacle, we could not overcome it. We couldn't get to closing. And the solutions that we put forward to Penvest to try to get to closing just weren't workable in a reasonable amount of time. So we're gonna have Ed talk about the long-term solution in the next item, but essentially the main obstacle relates to the trust indenture documents that we have for the lease bonds for the Allentown water and sewer lease, and the security that, or the inability to provide the level of security that Penvest is looking for this financing. So that kind of led us to a lot of internal discussion and thinking about this project in particular, as well as long-term, how we manage to fund these lead program projects. And we determined that for this project, which is the first cycle, that it made sense for us to try a different approach, rescind approval for the Penvest financing, and then take some action to reshape the scope of the project to handle it a different way. And we'll talk about all those steps in the other items on the agenda. But for this particular action item, to affect the change and rescind our approval of the Penvest financing, we want to have the board take official action to rescind approval for the borrowing resolution. And that will be then something that we can send to Penvest as notification later today if the board approves that action.
Is there a resolution that needs to be?
There's not a new resolution. I attached the resolution that you passed,
Yes.
which shows all the details of the financing and shows the vote and all that back in November. And what we're asking for today is for you to take action to rescind that approval. And Kevin, do you have anything you want to say on that piece of it?
Yes, certainly. You certainly outlined it well. Essentially, the action item is just a motion to rescind resolution 11-2024-2. That way the minutes, if in fact the board takes that action, the minutes will reflect the fact that the prior resolutions are now off the book.
I should also note that Tim Horstman, who is our bond counsel for these bonds, is on the call and ready to answer any questions about that aspect of it if we have any questions. Hi, Tim.
Hi, Lisa. Good afternoon, everyone.
Any questions from the board members? So,
I move that we rescind resolution number 11-2024
thank you.
-2.
Thank you, Linda.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Jeff. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the resolution was passed to rescind the resolution 11-24-2. Moving to the next item. This is the Allentown Water and Sewer Lease Bond Trust Indenture Amendment Bondholder Consent Process Authorization. This is only for discussion.
Yeah, so there's no actual authorization today. That's I should have removed that word. But for this item, we'll have Ed talk through the process and how he's envisioning going forward with bondholder consent. The focus is to address the language in the trust indenture that's created this obstacle with Penvest, and there's a process, potentially lengthy process to go through to try to make that happen. And you want to describe your process and your thinking on this one?
Yes, I wanted to just, you had given some good background on the obstacles that we face with Penvest and the fact that when we were scheduled to close, we could not because them obstacles became very obvious. So essentially, given, and I'm using financial terms here a little bit, the bondholders in this city, as part of the original concession agreement acceptance, let's just say in the neighborhood of $350 million, have what you would call first lien rights. So it's a water and sewer revenue bond, and essentially they're entitled to first lien on it. And subsequent project borrowing / or Penvest borrowing that we talked about would become second level subordinate in terms of the indenture agreement and concession agreement itself. The provision that came up concerned itself with Penvest being at a subordinate level, which off the top, and Tim, you can correct me if I'm going astray here, off the top was not a problem. It was some of the terms and conditions within that subordinate level that created the issues and essentially halted the grant loan process. So given that we proposed maybe 10, 12 different items to deal with this that were not acceptable, it sort of leaves us with the only chance to affect a change to the indenture, which is essentially what Penvest is really needing us to do to make that subordinate level amenable to them. Essentially, we have to go out and get bond consent. We are not in a position where it would be even close to economically lucrative to do a refinancing. So we're sort of in that precarious situation. It's either this or we do nothing at all. And the truth of the matter is, it's a great program that Penvest is doing. They're funneling grant money. We have the ability to get some grant money, some low interest loan money, and you just can't turn your head on that. So where we are going is we are going to embark on getting bond consent to change some of the indenture language that Tim is going to work on to make the conditions favorable for Penvest. To do that, we have to go and find out who holds the bonds. If you remember back a couple of years ago, we did the refinancing, major refinancing in the city. We ended up getting on board with a lot of institutional investors at the time. One of them that comes to my mind is BlackRock, who took a couple of tranches. And essentially, what happens is if we do this and we want to do this, we need to know who holds the bonds. And we're hoping that as we go out and search for them bondholders, we find a profile that is a whole lot more, I'll call it amenable to bond consent process. Particularly, the more institutional investors that we have holding the bonds, the better the opportunity for us to affect some type of negotiation, discussion, and subsequent approval of what we want to do. It becomes a little bit more difficult as you get into the, I'll call it retail world, where there's private people holding it, as I'm led to believe by a number of financial people. They tend to treat that document like a proxy and toss it in the waste can. So we are embarking on a search to find out who owns the bonds. We touched base with a company that we think is a good match for us. who is, I thought, gonna charge us a very small amount, $4,000 to see what that profile is. So while there are a number of steps to be taken in this process, we think the first thing to do is find out who owns the bonds, get a flavor for what the profile of the bondholders are, then decide whether or not we want to continue the process. And we're under no further obligation to do that if it's not financially feasible. So for right now, our outrun cash outlay will be in the neighborhood of $4,000, which I think is a sort of a bargain as compared to some other firms that were throwing out much more than that. So kind of summarizing, we want to start the process. Starting means get the profile. We'll take a regroup on that after we see who owns it. Maybe it's as simple as having a couple of discussions with these institutional investors and seeing what they really seeing whether they like what we propose as an amended indenture language or not, and at least starting a conversation. And that's kind of what we're talking about.
You need all of the bondholders or a percentage?
You need 51%.
51%.
Yes.
And how long do you think this will take if it actually gets done, roughly?
It's sort, I mean, originally I had heard 6 to 9 months. The latest feedback would be that if there's a higher proportion of institutional, that's a lot faster. So I'm gonna say 6 months, maybe it comes in less than that. But I think it's at least a step in the right direction now in terms of what we need to do.
And I think where we landed with this approach is in looking at the cost that, I mean, the other option to get bondholder consent is to refinance 51% of your bonds. And you would just issue the new indenture with that refinancing. Very expensive to do that because our bonds aren't currently callable.
Yes, when we have done refinancing, we've talked about net present values that were positive. I can tell you it would be minus $70-some thousand or 70 million, not 70,000. 70 million.
And I have a question. It's Ted.
Go ahead, Ted.
Why would a bondholder agree to move themselves to a secondary position behind Penvest?
So what we're proposing in terms of the indenture language, and Tim, if you want to jump in where I'm out on a limb, not making the right statement, is the bondholder, the Penvest situation would still be a subordinate level. But one of the primary problems with that subordinate level below the first lien holders is ability to call or accelerate the loan itself. And so we're trying to draft language that doesn't do harm to the first lien holders and do subordinate level language that is amenable to Penvest, and they're willing to be satisfied at that subordinate level, given we take care of them situations.
The other thing I think that's important is maybe how we talk about the Penvest opportunities, because we need the trust indenture to be rewritten even to accept grants. And so having LCA be eligible and able to accept grants is a positive for the bondholders because it reduces our overall project cost and, you know, draw on our revenues for those projects. I think there's a way to sell it in terms of the positive effect on the system that the bondholders are interested in. Tim, you want to add anything about the language or what Penvest is really looking for?
Sure, I'd be glad to. Just to kind of clarify Ed's points, Penvest is comfortable maintaining its subordinate lien position, but what the indenture provides here is that the authority can issue subordinate bonds, but with certain strings attached. And Penvest has objected to the majority of those strings. We had worked out a resolution of these issues, but Penvest has indicated that it can no longer accept the prior proposal that was submitted. So as a result, what we're looking to do now is gauge the possibility of having the bondholders consent to an amendment to the indenture to remove those strings. Penvest would still be a subordinate lien holder. The outstanding bonds that are the primary bonds outstanding under the indenture, they would continue to have priority lien status. So it would just simply be a removal of some of those strings to accommodate Penvest requests so that the authority can then move forward with issuing subordinate debt to Penvest and thereby securing the grant opportunities that are available from Penvest.
Have you talked to Penvest that if you make this indenture amendment, they would be happy and there is not another issue they would have?
So Tim,
I did hear the question, Ed, and I can tell you that I did have substantial discussions with Penvest Chief Counsel where the specific objections were noted. So when it comes to an amendment process where we have to get consent, we will draft the amendment based on those specific objections, and we will also obtain Penvest's approval of the ultimate amendment. But obviously, there are no guarantees when it comes to a lot of things in life. And knowing that the prior experience we've had, I can't say definitively that it would remove the possibility of future objections from Penvest on other matters.
What's your, Ted here for a question. What's your guesstimate as to how many bondholders there are that own sufficient number of bonds that would sign off for this change?
I was gonna say, I don't have any way to gauge that. Again, it depends on whether or not, when we did the tranches years ago, that they subsequently didn't get resold. So I guess the best answer I can give, that's what we're trying to find out.
I would agree with that, Ed. Unfortunately, there's just no way of knowing. The way this works, you may have a few large institutions that hold the bonds. Entities like Vanguard, for instance, they buy a lot of municipal bonds, but Vanguard isn't the direct holder of that bond. Obviously, if you have an account with Vanguard, you place you make investments through that account that you have. You are the beneficial owner, so you may very well own a small percentage of some of these bonds. But we can't go and talk with thousands and thousands of beneficial owners. What some of the folks we've been talking with to potentially engage to assist with this process, what they do is they are highly experienced with identifying and working with these institutions to identify a majority. So the hope is that if we can identify a few of these large institutions that hold collectively a majority through beneficial ownership, we can then streamline things and just have a discussion with, maybe it's 2, maybe it's 3, maybe it's 5, who knows? But the hope is that we can then streamline things and obtain the consent from those institutions indirectly.
And the feeling is that if and when you can find the appropriate bondholders, they will consent to these changes.
Yes, that would be the feeling. Now, again, it's like a lot of other things in life. They may say they're fine with it, the language that we propose, because it doesn't do any harm to their position. In another case, somebody may say, what's in it for us?
All right, good luck.
So I guess
thank you.
The best thing is, it's a small expenditure right now to at least get started, and then we'll see where it goes. We're not laying out a big sum of money to do this. I think it makes sense. and gets us closer to where I think we need to be with respect to being able to transact business with Pembus on a regular basis, so.
I just have a question regarding process, and I don't know if you can answer it. If it goes to, if you find a Vanguard is part of this, okay? Do they have to notify all their people that are listed as partial bondholders?
I would say yes. I would say that that's probably not as difficult a process as us trying to do it
Oh,
individually.
I understand, I understand, but I didn't know whether they, as the institutional holder, can speak for the people, or they all have to be notified.
I think they would all have to be, but I would have to think that because it's under one manager, that's very facilitated.
Okay.
This is the only path we have to be able to get Penvest. There is no other avenue to meet the requirement of Penvest. Is that correct?
Considering
I can fill that one, Ed, if you'd like. Sure. So yes, we proposed numerous other options to Penvest in an attempt to resolve this without the need of obtaining bondholder consent, because it is an onerous process. Penvest, Penvest did reject all those other options we proposed. So at this point, we see no other option to secure those grants through Penvest than going this route.
Well, Ted said, good luck. Because
Good luck, right?
we need the money from Penvest, so I think, okay.
So there's no action requested on this. This is just a discussion and Q&A. And when you have more results from that initial
Yes.
research, we'll come back
Sure.
and discuss where we are next.
Tim, thank you.
Any questions?
Yep, you're welcome. Thank you, everyone.
No question from board members? Let's move on to the next. A capital project authorization amendment, the construction phase. This is for approval, blue pages, digital board package, page 15 to 19.
Okay. So now that we have the Penvest issue kind of behind us, at least in terms of this discussion, we have kind of an exciting opportunity to take a look at this project a different way. And I will say that through the whole process of understanding what was going on with Penvest, we've had a lot of internal team discussion about what should we do, how should we move, how can we move forward with this project. And just by way of background, I think we're all well aware that the EPA has established a new regulatory requirement that requires all lead service lines be removed by 2037. And for us, especially in our Allentown division, that is a very major initiative, a big project. Tens of thousands of service lines we will need to address. And we're estimating over the course of the project, those 13 years, likely to spend $200 million to do that. So this project in particular, the Cycle 1 project, was important to us because we felt it was an opportunity to kind of pilot the process and really understand how to do this type of project, which is very different from anything we've done in the past. It's extremely detail-oriented, customer by customer, property by property, and needing to get those processes documented and ready for us to really enlarge the program so we can meet the deadline. So during the course of the last 2 months of the year, team members, most of which are here in the room, and actually quite a few others, met numerous times. We talked about a whole range of options. One of the options we thought about was just postponing the project and allowing Ed to go figure out how to get bondholder consent and then, pick it up later if Penvest would allow us to extend that long. We also talked about, well, if we don't have Penvest, this is a smaller project, maybe we just self-fund it and continue on as planned. We also talked about maybe we just cancel the project, don't do it, and, wait for the next cycle. Ultimately, though, we really felt that it was important to do this project and to try to find a way to make it work. And if there was also a way to do that through self-funding, but lower the impact of the project to our customers, that would be the most beneficial way to move forward. And specifically, we're talking about losing $3 million or so of grant money that does have an impact to our customers. So we can change the scope, reduce the scope in some way to minimize the impact of losing the grant. That's what we wanted to do. In the memo, I've listed maybe 10 or so different things that our pilot project was focused on in terms of developing the process. Customer communication, legal mechanisms to get rent entry, to do the private side service line replacements, all the permitting and PA1 call stuff. There's just a lot of very detailed things we want to capture. And we thought that in discussing it internally that we could do that with a smaller subset of service lines and also by self-performing some portions of the work. I also want to note that we already have 44 customers signed on in this small project area and have signed a right of entry agreement. So we have customers waiting for us to come do their service line. And I think abandoning the project doesn't feel right from that standpoint either. So what we have developed, I'm going to lean on some others in the room to talk about some of these pieces, is a smaller scale project where we would do 100 service lines and self-perform the inspection side and the public side replacements using our own staff. For a small number of service lines, we think that we have the capacity to do that. And I'd like to turn to Chris and maybe talk a little bit about your team, because it's your team that would be implementing that piece of it.
Thank you. Actually, the field service team was really excited when we heard that there may be an opportunity for us to self-perform. The guys that work in the city of Allentown for the field services are super involved and really want to get the lead out of the system. A lot of them are local homeowners there, so they're invested in this program. Last year alone, we purchased special equipment in January, line pulling equipment, specifically with this type of work in mind. And throughout the course of a year, my team pulled 168 public side lead lines out of the system already. So I believe, and everybody on the teams believe, that we have the process and the practice to do the physical work. To Lisa's point, this is going to be a learning process for a lot of the other stuff. What we haven't done a whole lot of is the private side, reaching out to the customers and getting approval for us to do private side line work, which helps greatly having the 44 already agreed to paperwork in hand. We believe we've made some really good contracts with some local plumbers that's going to help us through this process. And we would manage the communication between the end customer and the plumber themselves so they can do the work. And to Lisa's point, we would then kind of manage and monitor 18 or 24 months post that for any sort of warranty work. We do believe we could do it considerably cheaper than was initially thought. Really excited for the opportunity to do so.
So the idea with this project is that it's smaller in scale. So the 150 services is reduced down to 100, but also we're reducing the scale of the scope of the work on the inspection side. So we had planned with the prior project to what we call pothole, up to 500 service lines to identify material. And now we're going to scale that way down to just the streets where we're working on with those 100 service lines, get that process kind of down pat and focus on the documentation of all of these really customer-facing processes.
Excuse me, Lisa, Ted here. I have a question. It would be really helpful to the board, in particular to Ted, if we could really get in the weeds on this and show us, maybe we have to do a sketch at the next meeting, exactly what's going on here. When you talk about pulling the lead line, what does that mean? Talk about the customer side and the city side. And I'd like to know, I get asked questions by people, exactly what goes on here when we replace these lead lines. What's the process? What literally happens where the rubber meets the road? Thank you.
Thanks, Ted. I actually have a diagram I should be able to pull up and show that might help with the conversation. Let me just go ahead and share my screen for that. And so this diagram was developed to share with customers to help with the communication about this and get to exactly what you're talking about, Ted. So the water main that's in the street is not a concern. It's not lead. It's cast iron or other materials, primarily cast iron or ductile iron. And then the service line is the material that goes from the water main into the house. And the ownership changes at what we call the curb box. And this is typically in the curb line, in the sidewalks, in that general vicinity. So the material on either side, the public side or the private side, could be lead, could be a galvanized material requiring replacement, or it could be copper or some other material that doesn't need replacement. We just don't have perfect records of what the material is. So the inspection process in a lot of cases has been going door to door, so we can go into the basement and look at the material coming in the wall. And that's the work that we've been focused on in the past 12 months or so, doing these door-to-door inspections. But the potholing work that we mentioned is really about digging down to this location where the curb stop is, so we can see both sides of the material on either side of the curb stop and identifying what needs to be replaced. We have enough records for this small service area in Allentown to know that we have 100 service lines to do. It's just a matter of really identifying which ones we're going to do. The 44 customer side service lines that we have agreements on were based on the inspections that Chris's team did last year to identify inside the home what the material is. So what we're talking about with this project is really a couple different parts. Chris and his team will be replacing the service line on the public side, because that's what we own and that's what we have the equipment and the expertise to do. We don't need an SOP to do that. We know how to do that. But they will also be doing some inspections through that potholing or excavation type method to further identify service line material on either private or public side as they go along. And then we will be hiring a plumbing contractor to handle those 44 private side replacements and any others that we gather along the way through the process. We think that a private plumbing contract is needed because there's some items that will require a certified plumber, such as connecting a thermal expansion tank or doing backflow prevention testing, those kinds of things that might occur as you're connecting new pipe into the home plumbing side of things. So we're expecting to bring a plumbing contract back to the board for that side of it, but we have a good idea of what that's going to cost because we have a couple plumbing contracts that we've been working on developing.
That's the question. I'm envisioning a block of row houses in Allentown, downtown Allentown, where you have scores of connections running from the main into the building. Will the sidewalks have to be excavated? Will this be lawns dug up, etc.?
So, yes, ultimately, yes. The equipment we currently have minimizes that greatly. So the line puller that I mentioned a few minutes ago, Ted, allows us to dig a 3 foot by 3 foot hole to go in and stick a piece of machinery in. And then we can work with a smaller hole by the curb stop and feed the line back through the existing lead line. So it pulls the old lead line out and they're kind of hooked together, and then it feeds the new copper through. So historically, we would have had to trench.
Yes.
But moving forward, we will be doing small patches, 2 foot by 2 foot, the biggest 3 foot by 3 foot.
How do you break the connection at the main in the street with the existing line?
So on the mains, we do have corpse, and it is it's a compression fitting. Depending on the material in the corpse, we may change them out as well. In that regard, if we have to change out the corpse, we will have to depressurize the main a little bit.
Yes.
Spin out the old corp and spin in a new copper corp. That's if we determine if they're lead bronze. If they are just, made after 1960, we will just, loosen up the compression fitting, do the same thing on the curb stop. Curb stop is basically a T with 2 compression fittings, north-south, and then a large nut on top that we can turn water on and off. And we do shut off the curb stop. We shut off the corp at the main, depressurize the line, decouple from each location, pull through the dirt, reconnect, and re-energize the line.
Wow. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
And while it sounds technically complicated, that's actually the easier part for our team because we have experience doing this work. I think what we really were focused on with this pilot is all the data management, the customer communication, the legal side of things, getting new agreement language put together, and then tracking the project when it's at that home by home, customer by customer level. It's just very different from anything that we do.
How far into the building are you gonna go? To the water meter? Is that basically it?
Yes.
To the meter, yeah.
To the meter?
So thanks for asking for this graphic. I think this is a good one that helps to explain what we're doing. One thing I wanted to mention about the excavation at the main to do the connection, we will have to excavate at the street, right?
Yes, that's where we will put our 3 by 3 hole.
Right. So the third component of the project then is paving. And the city and LCA have a paving cost sharing agreement. That was part of the initial project vision. And what we have talked about with the city in terms of shrinking the scope of this project is that we will then also shrink the number of streets that we will be impacting, and then we can reduce the cost of paving. And we're estimating at this point a 20% reduction on paving costs. So the 3 main components, we'll say, of the project, again, are the self-performed service line replacements and investigation work that Chris and his team will do, the plumbing contract for the private side, and then the paving. So those 3 are the main cost components anyway.
How deep are the mains in the street?
Minimum 4 feet. We've seen them as deep as 6.5 or 7, but arguably 4 to 5 feet, Ted.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
So what this means in terms of the authorization, the board had previously taken action to authorize the construction phase as well as a contract with Pact One for the larger scope of this pilot project. And on page 3 of the memo, I have a little bit of a crosswalk from the original project that was authorized to the new cost estimate with the change in the scope and the approach. So you can see we're reducing in a lot of areas, including engineering and inspection. We think that for the smaller scope and the hands-on work that Chris and his team are going to do, we can handle those in-house. The construction contract is the big ticket item, the $2.4 million. And then we'll have to add in some costs related to plumbing service for the private side, some materials and equipment to help Chris and his team be effective. And I will reduce contingencies. And I missed one item on here, which is the reduction in the paving cost. We're thinking about $140,000 reduction in the paving cost for this project. And that gets us from the $4 million construction phase that was approved down to $1,756,500.
Other question. I'm sorry for all the questions.
Okay.
Will this be done on 8-hour shifts? Any thought of going beyond single shift?
No, we intend to do it on normal, 7 to 3:30 shifts.
Gonna have to close everything up every day.
Yeah, so as we've been doing these, like I said, we did about 168 last year. We've gotten pretty efficient, Ted. So if we can get started first thing in the morning, we can be done by 2:00 in the afternoon, have it backfilled, tamped, some cold patch on top, and everybody can be back for dinner.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
When you said you did 168,
Yes.
did what?
We replaced 168 lead public service lines so far in 2024.
Why are we only doing 44?
So we have to be clear about what we're talking about with these. There's a lot of different facets to the EPA regulation. So the EPA regulation requires that we replace all the lead service lines, public side and private side, in the whole system over the next 13 years. However, it also requires that we replace lead service lines when we encounter them on an emergency basis. And so we have throughout the year, that's how many roughly service line leaks we encountered. So the guys are out there, they're investigating a service line leak where normally they might patch it or repair it in some way. Now they're replacing it. And so that's where they've gained the experience with the equipment and the process to say the technical side they know how to do. What we haven't done is the private side. And we don't think that we should necessarily be doing that because of the plumbing context within the customer homes. Okay, yeah.
So the PACT contract, was that for them to do everything?
Yes.
They were doing everything, plus the investigations, but the replacement was public side, private side,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah.
So please, if I can, this is actually going to require us to spool up a second crew because we fully expect to have another 150 to 175 emergency replacements to do in the year. And based on regulations, we have to maintain that. So this is actually us spooling up another 4 to 5 man crew we already have a lot of the equipment. We have a lot of the experience. So we're actually going to have 2 full crews of our guys out in the streets daily. Half of them are going to be doing emergency replacements. The other half are going to be focused on the pilot study for cycle 1 here.
So bring up a good point, Chris, where we're talking about creating a second crew for this. We're not talking about hiring 4 to 5 new people. We're talking about reassigning some tasks so that they can implement this project for us and do the work. We do have some budgeted new staff that we talked about during the budget process that we can look at and how that fits into the context of this project, of this program. But the idea is long-term, these projects are going to be much larger in scope. So we're doing 100 now with the teams that we have available, but in the future, we're not going to be able to sustain self-performing these projects when we're talking about 2,000 a year or some number of that size. I think that's probably pretty close to the right number. We'll have to be doing, 1,500, 2,000, 2,500 a year to hit the 2037 deadline. But again, the point of the pilot is not about the technical work that has to be done. It's about the process. So to have us self-perform this pilot project, we think it makes sense. And then, and we're not asking for additional headcount to do that, just through readjustment of the work.
And the 44 that we're planning, one specific area so that the streets and everything
Yeah.
get done at the same time.
Yeah, the 44 that we have customer agreements on are all in the same area, and we're actually hoping to get closer to the full 100. Still in that same area, it's a handful of streets, 4 or 5 streets in a specific geographic location.
The original, for the cycle 1 project, the total money was all coming from Penwest, or was a portion coming from us, portion was coming from Penwest?
It was almost all coming from Penvest except for the paving. Penvest does not cover paving.
Okay. So all these expenditure that we were going to be approving shortly is a new addition to our 2025 capital expenditure, is that correct?
It's actually, so the Penvest loan itself was expected to be 1.5 million of the total project cost.
Okay.
So we're, that was the loan, I'm sorry, the loan portion was supposed to be 1.5 million. So we've kind of refocused the project, shrunk the scope. So now we're talking about expense roughly 1.8 million. So the budget impact is actually pretty small.
Small, okay.
Yeah.
Any other question from the board member?
I appreciate the kind of going with it and with all the questions, because there was a lot of thought process and the big change for us to take this type of approach with the project. To do this, we actually have 2 action items that we're asking for. They're listed on the front of the memo, as well as some details inside. We have an amended capital project authorization, kind of showing the original authorization and then the amended authorization, what that looks like. And then we also will need to ask for the board to approve contract termination for Pact 1. Pact 1 has not done any work yet on this project. So they were expecting to start the project on November 18th, which was a couple days after our planned closing date. Because we didn't close on the Penvest grant and loan, we put a 90-day suspension in place for the contract to help us, give us time to figure this out. There is a possibility there might be some change order costs because of mobilization or other things that they might have incurred, but essentially they've completed no actual work on the project. But we do need to formally terminate the contract, and we'd like the board to approve that as well.
Do we need 2 approval?
There's two approvals, yes. The capital project authorization amendment, reducing the project from $4,024,857 down to $1,756,514. And then the termination of the general construction contract with Pact 1.
We have to vote separately, or we can do it together?
That's your call.
I would recommend if you pull them apart.
Pull them apart?
Yes.
Yeah. So the first one is a capital project authorization amendment for construction phase 1, which is for the amount of $1,756,514.
So moved.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you. It was
That was Norma.
Norma. Okay. Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposition? No. So that was passed, and the other one was terminating the, what was the name of the company? I'm sorry.
Pact 1.
Pact 1 is terminating the contract with Pact 1 for the Cycle 1 project. Can I have a motion?
And if I may interject just something real briefly here, the board's action would be terminating the contract effective immediately and in full, in a manner consistent with the contract, and authorizing the CEO and CFO to take any other associated actions, including those.
Thank you. Glad to have you on board here. And I have a motion for that.
I'll make
Amir,
that
I'll-
motion.
Okay. I'll second that, Demir, Mark.
Okay. Motion made by Norma and second by Mark. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? No.
I have
Thank you.
one
Quick.
question. On the plumbing side, we pay those costs also, correct? And about how many contractors do you think you'll need?
But we've engaged, we've received quotes from 4. We are really engaged with 2. And of those 2, one of them has kind of made a really serious commitment to the authority, as well as a commitment to wanting to get the lead out of the system. I don't know that, I don't want to mention any names yet. I'm sure it'll come up. But they were really interested in becoming a partner with LCA throughout this whole process.
So
So
you're only hoping for one.
we're gonna have to have at least 2, I would say, because there are gonna be situations along with our emergency work where one is gonna be tied up in 2 or 3 or 4 homes at one time, where we're gonna have to fall over to at least a second one. So at least 2.
Okay.
No question. Let's move to there's no item under water. Let's move to the wastewater. This is only for discussions, the regional sewer capacity and wet weather planning, Regional Act 537 plan preparations. Lisa, you gonna be leading that?
Yeah, we do have a presentation to
Yes.
share. And I also want to recognize Mike Schober from Arrow is on the call too. So he's the consultant who's been helping Phil with the preparation of the Act 537 plan. So Mike, jump in anytime you like.
Will do. Thank you.
We have a presentation to share, and really the purpose of the presentation is just to bring the board up to speed on everything that we have been working on and the next steps that we plan to take, because this is coming to conclusion.
Hopefully, yes.
Yeah. So I'll give some background and then I'll turn it over to Phil for some of the technical stuff. If you have attended any of our open house events, you may have seen some pieces of this presentation as well, but we've added some detail as well. So as I think everyone here knows, the Klein's Island sewer system, we call it KISS for short, is in a position of really requiring a new generation of investment. Many components of the system were built in the 1920s through the 1980s and are reaching the end of their useful life and are also undersized for the future capacity that we require for our system to serve the region. So we have been working on this plan for 5 years, but really for probably 15 in total, in various ways, shapes, and forms. So we are happy to say that the municipal leaders of the 15 municipalities that we serve are coming together to develop this plan and really bring it to a conclusion. Klein's Island Sewer System Service Area is comprised of 15 municipalities. And just as a reminder, the Act 537 process, which is the state regulation that this falls under, is a municipal process. So all 15 of these municipalities have to be engaged in the process, and we hope will approve the plan. This is just what it looks like on a map. And I think everyone here is aware that all 15 of the municipalities covered in that shaded area, all the wastewater generated flows to the Klein's Island wastewater plant in Allentown. We treat about 32 million gallons per day, serve about 270,000 people in this service area. And that covers about 1,000 miles of pipe. One of the complexities that we've been challenged with this planning process is the historical agreements and the different ownership arrangements between LCA and the city and the municipalities. So LCA owns a pretreatment plant, some of the interceptors and pump stations. We also operate collection systems in 3 townships, Weisenberg, Low Hill, and Upper Milford. And we operate the city system under the lease agreement. But the city owns the wastewater treatment plant in Allentown, some other interceptors, and the city's collection system. And then each municipality owns their own collection system and pump stations. So we have generated since the 1950s, 75 approximately intermunicipal agreements that relate to how all this works. And it is a very complex and historical process that we're trying to untangle and put back together in a way that makes sense. I think everyone here knows who LCA is, but just in context of our Act 537 plan, we are really focused on facilitating the process, making sure that the plan meets DEP requirements for Act 537 plan, and then the regional project will take ownership of implementing those. I wanted to touch very briefly on the pretreatment plant because it is a central component of the plan, and we've talked a lot about it in this room and in other settings as well. Pretreatment plant is located in Fogelsville and serves the industrial customers in that area. Was constructed by the county in the late 1980s, went into service in 1990, and essentially was put in place as an investment to help incentivize food and beverage manufacturers to locate in this area. And that worked because we have a lot of food and beverage manufacturers in the area. However, it is a 35-year-old plant and requires major capital investment. And we have some major challenges on how we recover those costs. So it became a really central component to the planning process. I mentioned the economic value of the pretreatment plant where we're serving a lot of businesses. I think most importantly is those businesses employ almost 3,000 people and generate $250 million in annual earnings. So it's a significant economic driver for Western Lehigh County. We've talked in the past about the challenges here with the pretreatment plant being not only at the end of its useful life, but also out of capacity for new growth. And also we have a major financial challenge in terms of how we recover costs of capital. So we've developed a solution that will entail designing and constructing a smaller plant to serve the specific needs of a select number of industries that need it. And that will be more cost effective than trying to refurbish the entire old facility that we have. So we're still working on those financial components, but wanted to make sure it's part of the picture of 537 planning process. The broader plan, however, covers the entire system, and I'll let Phil talk about all of that.
Yes, thanks, Liesl. And just to reiterate what Liesl said about the age. So if you start from Klein's Island at the bottom of the system, built in the late 1920s, follow the core all the way up from the plant, up Martin Luther King, up through the Parkway, just follow the Little Lehigh Creek. It was put in the 1920s, 1930s, and then the Western Lehigh was put in the 1970s. So it was some of it was planned, designed, installed 100 years ago. Some of it was installed 50 years ago. No one, you only have so much foresight when you put these pipes in. Unfortunately, here there's a couple diameters too small. Is what it turns out to be. So that's why we have all these challenges with overflows. When it rains. So there's a picture that at least will show that this shows the size again of some of that core, which we'll get into. Again, Lisa, just on that previous slide, the capacity for new connections. Just as a reminder, in early 2020, DEP put the entire system under a connection management plan. that remains in place to this day. And I have to report, or the region has to report to DEP every quarter on the connections that were approved. And then on the flip side, what is being done on a quarterly basis for your I&I reductions. So again, there's been about, 4 reports a year, so they've seen 20 reports already. And until the connection plan is lifted, those reports continue indefinitely. So they actually did one's due tomorrow. So they're gonna get one tomorrow again. So again, the regular oversight is not stopping. The I&I, again, we have a full hydraulic model. Portions of it were built 10 years ago, and again, the new one was built 3 to 4 years ago. Fully calibrated, we used all 2021 data, if you recall. So we did, as part of the interim plan that we were under, the interim 537 that we're under right now, we committed to do planning through 2050. That's what we did. So we have all 15 entities flow projections that go to the plant. We have all those projections. They were loaded into the model. Kind of for different storm events. And then when conditions are right, you see in excess of 160 million gallons trying to get to Klein's Island, and that all can't get there because of the piping restrictions. So if it doesn't get there, either it goes out the outfall that we've discussed in the past, or it comes out of manholes upstream. And both of those are not acceptable to DEP, obviously. So that's what we're trying to address. And it's a peak problem. The conditions have to be right for that to happen when it happens. And then I don't want to overlook that last statement there, Lisa. 32 MGD, again, 32 MGD, million gallons a day. That's the average that Klein's Island sees. Of that 32, 10 is normal infiltration that in theory can be removed. So the plant's rated for 40, sees normally 32. Of that 32, 10 is infiltration.
And you know where most of it's coming from?
That's the challenge, is trying to pinpoint the exact neighborhoods. That is the challenge that the entire region faces. We have the hot spots. It's trying to find, going down to the neighborhood level. That's what we have to do. So again, we know the hot spot, if you will, hot spot areas. Now we're trying to find the exact neighborhoods. Again, this graph is a Klein's Island flow versus precipitation from 18 to 20. In August of 18 is when the rains picked up. If the rains pick up, and you can see what happens to the Klein's Island flows. So it's a strong correlation. If high precipitation, that means the groundwater gets saturated. That means the groundwater gets into the leaking pipes, which means it flows to Klein's Island. So our system is highly dependent on the groundwater conditions. And again, when the rains of 18, it was a sustained rain all the second half of 18 into 19. Groundwater was way high. Groundwater table was elevated, which means flows were elevated. And that's what kicked in the Chapter 94 violation that we're still under. So again, even though we had that violation, the plant met all its effluent discharge limits. The fact that we violated a permit number was the automatic trigger for DEP. Slide you've seen before. Again, Lisa mentioned it's been a 17-year, almost 18-year process now. In 2007, the United States EPA issued administrative orders, 2 of them. One to address that outfall at Klein's Island that they do not want to be activated, and the other administrative order was for overflows in the system. So again, 2 were issued. So then, all through the 2010s, the region addressed those 2 orders from the EPA. So of course, while the problems were happening with the groundwater and the high flows, the EPA lifted the AOs and turned it back to DEP to handle. So ever since middle of 2019, it's been EPA has stepped aside. It's all been Pennsylvania DEP, the Northeast region. So again, 2019, 2020, we entered into the connection management plan, which we're still under, and DEP is expecting the plan again this year. So again, just to reiterate what we already talked about. System has grown. It's aging. Longer it ages, the more I&I creep. It's called I&I creep. Full infiltration, the more it gets in. So you have to counter the I&I creep with I&I removal. So that's what we've been trying to do. Again, there's a picture coming up soon that shows you the bottlenecks. So yeah, so the capacity, dry day capacity is there at the plant. So it's a 40 MGD plant. 32 is there on a normal day. Now the problem with the capacity though, certain individuals hold the capacity. So LCA, we have our number, the city has our number, XYZ entity has their number. So we all share that 40. And some of us have more room to grow than others. And then it requires cooperation with entities to transfer that value, if you will. And then the last whole point there, the development pressure has not stopped. It continues to be constant pressure. This is just visualization purposes of again 2021. 2021 was we used a combination of permanent meters in the system and temporary meters. That just shows you where the meters were placed. There's about 100 meters that were used to collect the data over 7 months. And again, all that data was QA/QC'd to build a model. One of the results of the model after it was built was one of these, we call these heat maps. There's 3 of these heat maps that were created. There's 3 different ways to look at I&I. This is just one of the ways, again, when I said the hotspots, we know each map has its own unique hotspot, if you will. So all the municipalities used the results of the 2021 flow characterization to inform how they plan to remove the I&I. Again, it's their responsibility to come up with their own plan. As I mentioned, the piping situation, I know we spoke about this it's probably been 2 years already. It's a very crude picture, but it gets the point across. The plant's on the right there with the X. Hanover comes in from the east side across the river under a siphon. That's 36 coming from the east side. And you have a little bit of 60 going upstream. Then you start getting into the bottlenecks. That first big bottleneck there where Park Pump Station, the Forest Main dumps in, Salisbury Relief Interceptor dumps in, and the city interceptor all come together one spot, and you keep on going back upstream. The piping gets smaller. 36, then you get to the water plant. You have to go under siphons at the water plant. Then it gets to 30, and then here's the worst spot. We have the 27 to 30 and 36 all come together, and it leaves us 30. So that's when the conditions are right, that's where it overflows. So that was the basis of trying to resolve the piping situation. Was that, again, that crude picture. And on the left there, I show you, I say that, again, when the conditions are right, a lot of flow wants to get to the plant, but it can't all get there. So it has to come out somewhere. So it comes out manholes. That, a short duration, but it happens. There's no distinction about what you're looking at here. What this is a profile of Klein's Islands on the right, and just where that just upstream of the water plant is the far left-hand side. And that blue line is the HDL, means hydraulic grade line. So that's the model predicted flow level for a certain situation. And this situation happened to be, equivalent to a Hurricane Ida or Tropical Storm Ida. So anyway, this is an output from the model. It reaffirms what we already know. that the situation from the water plant to Klein's Island is extremely undersized. And the water wants to get out. So it either gets out of the manholes, or it goes upstream and finds its way upstream to get out.
Wait, so can you go back to that? So the brown and white, those are existing manholes?
Yes.
So anywhere where it's purple and white, that elevation is above the manhole cover. Is that correct?
Correct. But again, all these manholes are sealed here.
Yeah, no, I.
Right, so it's
in
just
theory.
pushing it, it's just gonna go upstream, miles upstream until it finds a spot to get out. Or it gets out here if the manholes are, completely sealed, it'll come out through the bolts. So what this is telling you is that the pipe is pressurized under these conditions, and it's not a pressurized, it was never meant to be pressurized. But it's been this way for quite a while. So again, 2022, 23, we did all those alternatives analysis. This was, one of the options was to, well, let's try to get rid of the flow from that section of pipe. And let's build a big pump station at the pretreatment plant and pump that flow there. So again, that was one of the options we looked at. It was, there's a lot of nuance there, but that was one of the options. And then the option that we landed on was, well, the first option was not cost effective. And DEP wasn't going to buy it. The second option was, well, let's just try to parallel the core. And the core being from Klein's Island all the way back up to the Parkway, all the way to follow the Lehigh Creek. It's all undersized. So those were the options that were discussed in 22, 23. And then we came to the beginning of 24, then we had to make a selection. So again, it left, and like Liesl mentioned, and like I just got done saying, those were the two big options that were addressed or that we reviewed. We landed on number 2 there, which was in essence paralleling the core. If you parallel the core, that means more flow is going to get to Klein's Island instead of coming out of the manholes. It's actually going to get to the Klein's Island. So that means you had to do peak wet weather improvements at Klein's Island to address those, that expanded flow. So we did all that. We had different phases of how to address the peak flow. And then at the bottom there, you reduce inflow and infiltration. That was always part of the plan. And let's see, the strong feedback that we got from DEP is that is the plan. They are not going to approve any paralleling of the core at this time. They want proof of reduction. They want it mathematically proved. So that was, again, this was always part of the plan, but it was never the focus. And in the past half year, it has become the focus. So we've had to re-engage all the signatories and all the municipalities to take a look at their I&I plans, make sure it's going to pass the DEP sniff test. Because, which we'll get into shortly, it's the plan is boiled down to I&I reduction and then Klein's Island capital improvements. So again, this was a last quarter. This is what was discussed at the open houses that Liesl mentioned. We always had this was a 10-year look ahead. So again, the top line was the I&I reductions from the municipalities. So it's their numbers added up. The wastewater plant, that was just normal wastewater capital plus the wet weather pieces. And then the 2 lines right there, the 2 interceptors that needed to be parallel as part of the core. So that was the philosophy, second half of last year. Well, I should say the first half of last year, and then we really switched gears recently. All that being said, we've instead of doing a 10-year commitment, we're now changing it to a 5-year commitment, because that's what all we have planned for from a capital side with some certainty on that regarding the Klein's Island plan. So again, the first line is I&I reduction from all the municipalities added up over the next 5 years. That's what they have committed to spend. Klein's Island plant, that is right from the LCA capital plan through 2029. I had to make an assumption about what 2030 would look like. Within that number is also phase one of the wet weather improvements. So again, we can only treat about 87 to 90 million gallons right now. We are going to expand that up to 100 million gallons a day of peak wet weather treatment. So that second line includes that 100 MGD project, if you will. And DEP has heard that, and they want that to occur. They want that to occur. So that is under design. I think the design's nearing the conclusion, actually. So the first two line items are again right from municipalities, or it's right from the LCA capital plan. Proposed relief interceptor, per DEP's direction, they are not approving any paralleling of the interceptors, so that has been reduced to 0. And then the Western Lehigh interceptor, that's annual money that we set aside for the interceptor system. So we add them all up, 123 to 135 over the next 5 years, just on capital, non-operating expenses. If the municipalities have other things they're doing in their own collection system besides ionized projects, that's for them to decide. And the pretreatment plant, as Lisa mentioned, that's been pulled and it's under review with the industries directly.
So if I could just jump in here with a question or a clarification. So the difference between what we presented to the public of the $300 million plan and what we're actually going to submit to DEP is the $125-30 million plan. The primary difference is time. Right? The projects that are included in the $300 million plan, we still expect to do, but just not in the next 5 years.
Correct.
So.
Yeah, I mean, we need to prove to DEP that what we're doing regarding the mathematical proofs. Then we're going to have that conversation about now what. Now what do we do?
I asked that question or the clarification because I think it's important when we're talking with the public and the municipalities that they understand this is not the end of the issue, that this is just the first 5 years.
Yeah.
How long does it take to get all the I&I things in place?
It's a challenge here. It's a challenge alone. If it was just one system, but now that I'm trying to coordinate 15 different people, and they all have different ways of looking at it, different ways of handling it, different engineers they use, different methods. That is the challenge, is to get everyone rowing to the same page.
Because that has a great impact on what you're going to be doing, right? So if you can get so much lower your I&I, then at the end, you might take a different approach.
Correct. And that's what DEP's kind of framework is. They want the new thing is they want mathematical proof of reduction. And with this, and then as a preview for next board meeting, Lisa can weigh in on that, what we're going to do with the city. So the city, of course, is the biggest nut to crack, if you will.
So you're at the mercy of different township for the I&I and what they're going to be doing?
Correct. We have 0 say on what they're doing. We can influence. It's up to them how much money they want to spend and what their situation is. And again, this was shared with the group last 5 days ago. So everyone there's reasons for all these numbers. I'm not going to get into the reasons why, but this is right from the municipality's mouth, if you will, right to Raf Tellis, our financial planner behind the scenes here. So, but again, with the city, we're roughly right from the capital plan, roughly $5 million a year. So if you want to boil it down, it's $10 million a year for the system for I&I. And a lot of it's, it's our best attempt to put dollars to a year. And I'm going to turn it over to Liesl here, but we've come so far and there's still so much more to do. I'm trying to get all 15 to give me information so Mike can get it all in the report. And the very first step is after we're comfortable with the report preparation. No more edits. I physically have to drop it off to all 15 planning commissions plus the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission. And that starts the process of review. So it's eerily similar to 5 years ago when we did this in 2020. If things work out, this will go to the planning commissions this quarter, which means that all 15 entities need to pass a resolution by August or September of this year. And DP again is expecting 15 resolutions. LT doesn't have to give one, but we gave one last time. And so does Copperwell. They don't have to give one, but they gave one last time. So we gave them 17 last time.
So the technical side that Phil just reviewed really was, it took a long time to get there, but essentially we think we have a plan that will address the major items associated with the aging infrastructure and growth in the near term in terms of being able to continue to do connections, address the SSOs, address the bottlenecks in the long-term second half of the 10-year plan. The area of the planning process that we're still working on, I would say, is the intermunicipal agreement side. We have a draft term sheet for a new intermunicipal agreement that all 15 municipalities are reviewing right now, but I think there are still some items that we have not nailed down. We still need to work through, but we've made a lot of progress over the last 6 months on that. The whole overall timeline for planning, this is not changed. We expect it to be kind of where we are now, which is in 2025, beginning the approval process. We're, maybe a few months behind schedule, but we're still looking at a 2025 submission to DEP. And what that looks like, Phil mentioned a few of these things already, but essentially we're hoping, planning, I'll say planning, not hoping, right? So you have the final plan drafted by mid-March so that we can release it to the planning commissions. And I wanted to put this calendar up for you so you can see there's lots of different points of comment and review. The planning commissions review first, and then we publish in the newspaper and have a 30-day public comment period. Those comments from the planning commissions or the public, the ones that we receive in writing, we have to respond to and include those responses in the plan. And then we deliver it to the municipalities and give them time to publicly review. And we hope adopt by resolution kind of by the end of August or so we can submit to DEP by September. That's our plan. It's just important for us to note that once we hit this date and submit the draft plan to the planning commissions, we're done. It's really not a draft at that point. We can't rewrite anything. So if there are comments that we haven't thought of, we need to hear those and incorporate that into what we're writing up. So I'm still going with this idea that we're doing this work over the next 10 years. The plan is a 5-year plan, but it is a 10-year look at the work that we need to do. If it's $300 million worth of work, that will be the largest investment our region has made in protecting public health and the environment. It's really important work we face. And I just wanted to end with touching on the public comments and public questions that we did receive at the open houses. We did a series of events throughout Lehigh County, lots of different locations. We did not have great attendance, I will admit, but we had lots of really good one-on-one conversations. We had a couple of the events where we had a nice crowd, but most of the events were very sparsely attended, but that allowed us to have lots of one-on-one conversation and questions. We received a lot of questions about things that weren't rates. And we expected to hear, how much is it gonna cost? What is my sewer bill gonna do? But we really received many more questions about, what does my township ordinance say about inspections? Or, where's the grant money that's might be available for this? Or, how will we know when roads are being torn up because of construction? So questions that are really at a personal level of wanting to understand how customers will interact with these projects seem to be much more important to the attendees anyway than the rate impact, because I think they understood these projects are so important to the community. So that was a good sign, I think. That's all we have for presentation. I think, again, just to the beginning, we're at this point now where we're finalizing the plan and talking about this repackaged 5-year plan is going to start going out to the municipalities for them to talk about as well. So we wanted to be sure that the LCA board heard about it and had a chance to ask questions about it.
Lisa, I have one, maybe not a question, but a comment. I mean, as we're thinking about, how long this plan will take, as it should, but I'm also thinking of, the LCA staff that's kind of assigned to this work, and the inevitable, I don't know, challenge or the inevitability that some staff that maybe are working on this initiative, by 2033, may not, may have moved off to different employment. So I guess my comment or question is, do we feel like we have kind of the knowledge sharing that is necessary for this type of kind of monumental process, that we have, ways in which, should people leave, and hopefully they don't, but we just have the right knowledge sharing mechanisms in place. If that makes sense.
It absolutely does, Sean. It's a great question. And I think that applies to the lead program as well. That's another one of those long projects that we're going to be doing for a lot of years. And I would say that with the 2025 budget allocation of some additional internal resources for this program will help us to build that internal capacity. But at this point, we are also pretty heavily reliant on consultant work to do the engineering side of things. So it's kind of a mix of resources there between internal and external. Certainly there's a desire to have the internal resource developed for overall program administration, because identifying where the I&I is coming from and removing it, and then measuring and seeing the results, and then having that fit within the overall regional program, I think is something we're going to be doing forever and needs to build that internal capacity for. I'm not there yet.
I have a question and a comment if Sean's done. So question, you said the DP is requiring, it's like a 25-year planning window for the flows, but they're only requiring you to include the next 5 years of capital projects?
Yeah, so the 537 checklist says 5 to 10 years.
Okay.
So we selected 5 for capital purposes, but we're doing flow projections for 10 years. It's a little nuanced. We're doing flow projections, well, we have 2050 flow projections.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have, and now we're going to submit through 2035.
Okay.
For flow projections.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Because we just don't know when we get to the year 2030,
Gotcha.
I'm not sure what's going to happen. So we're asking for 10 more years of connections.
Gotcha. Okay. And then I will say I was skeptical that you could get this all done or be this far along in 5 years based on my past experience. So I'm very impressed. Hopefully can finish out the last 5% is probably the toughest with the municipalities and the agreements and all that good stuff. But yeah, very, very well done.
It's been a process, and Mike's seen it all. He's been kind of stepped aside in the middle of it, but now Mike's back, and a lot of pressure on Mike and I to get this done. Yes.
You got a question from board member? Thank you. Moving on to the monthly project update.
Okay, you have the monthly project update report in your packet, in the white pages. And we have a number of items coming up for the next meeting in January. We will do a year in review strategic plan update at the next meeting. And a few other projects as noted. Just wanted to highlight that the monthly financial review for December, we're gonna push to February to give Ed time to close the books and do something that's close to audit numbers in February for us. Also in the project listing, for those of you who are here in person, it's probably obvious, but the main office parking lot expansion is underway. Chuck, I don't know if you have a timeline for completion on that work.
April.
So for the next few meetings, we'll be experiencing what we're experiencing now with the construction equipment. If there's any questions on anything else?
Any question? No? Okay. Thank you. So moving on, I think that's all the items we had on our agenda. Any staff comments?
I have a few.
Okay.
So kind of piling them all together for the end here. First of all, I wanted to note, actually, it's in the project monthly project report as well. But the omnibus resolution related to the delegation of duties to staff has been updated and reviewed by the governance committee, and they have given the green light to bring that back to the board for full review. We'll see that at the next meeting. So just wanted to make you aware of that, and thanks to the governance committee for that review. Another item that is more just a follow-up, the last meeting we discussed the interconnection for Emmaus to address PFAS for an interim solution while Emmaus is doing their treatment process. We've removed that project from the listing because through staff internal review, we really felt it was not a cost-effective or appropriate project for us to pursue for a couple of reasons. Number one, just the timing of it is really pretty tight as compared to the borough's project. And for the cost for us to do the work, it didn't seem to quite make sense from that standpoint. We also are pursuing the distribution of the water filter pitchers to customers who may request one. And Andrew and Sue and some others are working on communication around that. So we are providing at least some risk mitigation for customers in that system. And then the last item I have under staff comments relates to something we talked about during the budget process, was the idea that LCA may be providing operational services to some of the townships where we provide sewer service. And that might create some need for additional staffing. That was the context of the conversation. But I wanted to share with you that last week, Upper Macungie Township did approve a contract with LCA for us to operate and maintain 6 of their sewage pump stations. And it's kind of the first time we're kind of going into this scope of operational support for a municipality. We're expecting to bring that to the board for approval probably later this month. We want to put an actual agreement together, but wanted to let you know that kind of dream or idea concept has come to fruition, and we'll be moving that forward later this month.
Good. Thank you. Any other item?
That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Any solicitor comments?
No, thank you, Amir. Thank you.
Any public comment?
No, thanks, Amir.
Yep, no thanks.
Yes, from Brian. Any board member comment? Hearing none. So the meeting adjourned. I think we will meet, how about in 5 minutes?
5 minutes?
Yeah, 1:45
For the executive
for the executive sessions. Okay, guys, have a great week.